American politics has entered a dangerous era, one where sharp divisions have spilled into open violence. Should a man lose his life for believing in traditional families? Should he be executed in public view because he preached against what he saw as moral decay? And if leaders like Barack Obama cannot stand clearly and unequivocally against the kind of violence without diluting it with, but he was wrong, then are they encouraging a culture where political assassination becomes just another form of expression? Well, welcome to the Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, was gunned down on September 10th during a live event at Utah Valley University. Now, he was only 31. The suspect, Tyler James Robinson, just 22 years old, now faces charges of aggravated murder, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and weapons violations. Prosecutors have confirmed that they will seek the death penalty, pointing to political motivation, public endangerment, and Robinson's own text messages in which he admitted to the shooting. But as American mourns, one cannot help but ask, when leaders like former President Barack Obama take to the stage, are they offering comfort or are they taking another chance to score political points? Well, Obama called the murder horrific, but spent more time reminding Americans that Charlie Kirk's views were, in his words, wrong.
Obviously, I didn't know Charlie Kirk. I was generally aware of some of his ideas. I think those ideas were wrong, but that doesn't negate the fact that what happened was a tragedy and that I mourn for him and his family.
Fans and those who Charlie Kirk impacted couldn't help but question, wrong on what? Speaking against abortion, talking about faith in Jesus Christ, defending the Second Amendment, promoting family over promiscuity. What wrong exactly is the question his fans are asking. And even if one disagrees with all of his views, a question lingers. Does being wrong justify a bullet? Does it excuse the silencing of a man by force rather than by debate? Isn't this exactly the kind of rhetoric that turns disagreement into dehumanization, paving the way for people like Tyler Robinson to feel justified in pulling the trigger? Now, if leaders cannot draw a sharp line between debate and murder, then what message is being sent to the youth Kirk tried so passionately to involve in politics? Well, President Donald Trump had no such hesitation. In a fiery announcement, he declared Antifa, the loose radical movement long associated with violent protests, a major terrorist organization, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster. Trump said promising investigations into its funding and operations. For years, Antifa claimed to stand against fascism and racism, but then who gets labeled as fascists? Increasingly, it seems to be anyone who dares to disagree. And isn't that the very pattern we saw in Kirk's assassination? A young man branding his opponent hateful, then pulling the trigger. Well, Charlie Kirk's mission was never to incite violence. It was to involve the youth in politics, to awaken civic responsibility, to champion ideas that he believed would strengthen America should a man lose his life for believing in traditional values and traditional families. Should he be executed in public view because he preached against what he saw as moral decay? And if leaders like Barack Obama cannot stand clearly and unequivocally against the kind of violence without diluting it with, but he was wrong, then aren't they encouraging a culture where political assassination becomes just another form of expression? Well, the case now rests in court, but before we get into that detail, let's take a quick look at another host from the Fox, the 5 on the Fox, where they have the same siding of the rhetoric that it is the same thing on both sides and not facing the tragic incident that happened with Charlie Kirk. We'll take a look at that and the remark from Gutfield.
Fact of the matter is the both sides argument not only doesn't fly, we don't care. We don't care about your both sides argument. That is dead. For one thing, there is no cognitive dissonance on our side. On your side, your beliefs do not match reality, so you're coming up with these rationalizations like, what about this or what about that? We're not doing that because we saw it happen. We saw a young, bright man assassinated, and we know who did it. That is dead. For one thing, there is no cognitive dissonance on our side. On your side, your beliefs do not match reality, so you're coming up with these rationalizations like, what about this or what about that? We're not doing that because we saw it happen. We saw a young, bright man assassinated, and we know who did it.
we apologize for that break in transmission. But then going to the full details on the report, we took a look at the discussions on Fox News with the Five. And we can't help but ask the question, if leaders cannot draw a sharp line between debate and murder, then what message is being sent to the youth Kirk tried so passionately to involve in politics? And we saw that just about the same time when Barack Obama was making that statement of "but Kirk was wrong," Jessica Tarlov made a both sides rationalization of Charlie Kirk's assassination on the Five on Fox, even though subtly, but Greg Gutfeld couldn't take this same focus and had a rather heated response to that, one that we just saw on screen of Greg Gutfeld. Now, it's as if no one on the left is concerned that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, but are more concerned about what that is going to do to them politically, how it reveals they're way more violent and radical in their beliefs than the right wing. Now, the sad question is, can the left just say the assassination of a political voice just for his views, his opposing views, was wrong without the left rationalizing and justifying that assassination? But then it is no wonder why we saw Greg Gutfeld going all ballistic, sharing an outrage that the rest of America has over this sad incident. On the other hand, we saw President Donald Trump, who had no such hesitation in a fiery announcement where he declared, Donald Trump declared Antifa a loose radical movement long associated with violent protest, a major terrorist organization, on Twitter. He said it is a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster. Trump said promising investigations into its funding and operations. For years, Antifa claimed to stand against fascism and racism, but then who gets labeled as a fascist? Increasingly, it seems to be anyone who dares to disagree. And isn't that the very pattern we saw in Kirk's assassination? A young man branding his opponent hateful and then pulling the trigger. Well, Charlie Kirk's mission was never to incite violence. It was to involve the youth in politics, to awaken civic responsibility, to champion ideas he believed would strengthen America. Now, should a man lose his life for believing in traditional families? And should he be executed in public view because he preached against what he saw as moral decay? And if leaders like Barack Obama cannot stand clearly and unequivocally against the kind of violence without diluting it with statements like, but he was wrong in his views, then aren't they encouraging a culture where political assassination becomes just another form of expression at the cost of an innocent life? But the case now rests in the courts. Tyler Robinson could face the ultimate penalty if convicted. But the bigger trial is happening in America's conscience. Will disagreements remain the lifeblood of democracy, or will bullets become the punctuation to political disagreements? Now, before we get into other focus for the Flash News today, let's take a quick listen to this message from the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, with regards to the death of Charlie Kirk.
And I would like to think that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this basic idea of young people gathering to discuss and debate, that is the thing that we cannot let pass away just because the leader of Turning Points USA was gunned down by an assassin.
Oh, well, on the war with Israel and Hamas, we see that in Gaza, the war between Israel and Hamas entered another bloody chapter this week. Israeli forces pressed deeper into Gaza City, sending tanks and armored units into the heart of the urban battlefield. At the same time, Israel opened a new 48-hour evacuation corridor to allow civilians to escape the fighting. Yet with more than 65,000 Palestinian deaths reported by Gaza's health ministry and the United Nations warning of famine in the north, the humanitarian toll is staggering. Aid agencies say so-called safe zones offer little real protection. Still, Israeli officials insist the campaign is necessary to dismantle Hamas's military infrastructure and prevent Gaza from remaining a base for attacks. The government points to evacuation efforts as proof of its attempts to minimize civilian harm, but critics argue that the scale of destruction tells another story. And here lies the question: how can Israel protect its citizens from militant threats without inflicting suffering that fuels the very hostility it seeks to end. Now, amid the military pressure and mounting global scrutiny, we see that with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stepped before the cameras in Jerusalem with a message of resilience. He declared Israel's economy as very strong, pushing back against fears of collapse under wartime strain. Let's take a listen.
The Israeli economy is very strong. I have terrific confidence in it. It is strong. It is innovative. It weathered two economic crises. The Corona crisis came out first in the world, and the two-year war, where we have an enormous amount of investments. People are coming, and they'll continue to come for everything that we're doing, not only the economy and the technology of today, but the technology of the future, cyber, AI, and so many other things. And basically, my call to you, the investors of the world, get on board now, because we're...
Well, he called for a massive investment in the domestic industry to reduce reliance on foreign suppliers, even likening Israel's situation to Athens and Sparta, or perhaps Super Sparta, a nation forced to defend itself while nurturing cultural vitality. Netanyahu also acknowledged the risk of international isolation, saying Israel must prepare for sanctions and negative global narratives by investing in influence operations to counter what he described as misinformation. His message was clear. Israel must not only win on the battlefield, but also remain economically and diplomatically unshaken. For Israel, the war is about more than the current campaign. It is about ensuring survival in a hostile region and retaining the ability to stand firm regardless of external pressure. For much of the international community, the question is whether that survival can be secured without the devastation of Gaza spiraling beyond repair. Now, on to Ukraine war, we see it is pressing forward on several fronts. Ukraine, over the past week, it has begun receiving shipments of Patriot missile systems, munitions, and HIMARS rocket launchers through the Europe-funded Prioritized Ukraine Requirement list, the PURL, with pledges set to reach around $3.5 billion by October. Meanwhile, Russian infrastructure, especially its oil system, refineries, and key export ports like Ust-Luga and Primorsk continues to suffer under Ukrainian drone and missile attacks, which analysts say are cutting refining capacity by as much as a fifth. Russian forces also remain active. Massive drone and missile barrage continue over Ukrainian skies, and there have been civilian casualties from attacks in places like Zaporizhzhia. In this fragile, intensifying context, we see President Donald Trump placing a phone call to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Modi's 75th birthday. Now, in Trump's tweet, he thanked Modi for his support in efforts towards ending the war in Ukraine, describing India's contribution as significant. And to a reply, Modi reaffirmed India's commitment to a peaceful resolution of the conflict and expressed willingness to take the United States-India Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership to new heights. Well, away from this diplomatic front on the war, we see that the United States President Donald Trump's state visit to the United Kingdom has entered its second day, now marked by both ceremony and diplomacy that underscore the strength of the transatlantic partnership. On 17 September, the President and First Lady Melania Trump were welcomed with full pageantry at Windsor Castle by King Charles III and Queen Camilla. The ceremony included a guard of honor, carriage procession, and a wreath laid at St. George's Chapel to honor the late Queen Elizabeth II. Later in the evening, a state banquet in St. George's Hall saw both Trump and the King celebrate what they describe as the enduring special relationship between their nations. President Trump called the visit one of the highest honors of his life, praising Britain as America's greatest friend on the world stage. Let's take a listen.
Your Majesty, Melania and I are deeply grateful to you and Queen Camilla for your extraordinary graciousness. And to William and Kate, thank you so much. It's been so great being with you today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's a singular privilege to be the first American president welcomed here. And if you think about it, it's a lot of presidents, and this was the second state visit, and that's the first, and maybe that's going to be the last time. I hope it is, actually. But this is truly one of the highest honors of my life. Such respect for you and such respect for your country. For many, the British Empire laid the foundations of law, liberty, free speech, and individual rights virtually everywhere the Union Jack has ever flown, including a place called America.
Well, King Charles also highlighted centuries of shared history and values, from wartime alliances to cooperation on modern challenges, noting that the bond between London and Washington remains a cornerstone of global stability.
Throughout my life, from the very first visit to the United States in 1970, and over 20 visits since that time, I have cherished the close ties between the British and American people. In fact, had the media succeeded in the 1970s in their own attempt at deepening the special relationship, I myself might have been married off within the Nixon family. Mr. President, from York to New York, from Birmingham, England to Birmingham, Alabama, we are united by a common language and shared heritage. The many thousands of people from each of our countries who have made the other their home have enriched our societies immeasurably, a fact that gives me the greatest pride. Mr. President, Mrs. Trump, the bond between our two nations is indeed a remarkable one. Forged in the fire of conflict, it has been fortified through our shared endeavors and burnished by the deep affection between our people. Tested time and again, it has borne the weight of our common purpose and raised our ambition for a better world. So, in renewing our bond tonight, we do so with unshakable trust in our friendship and in our shared commitment to independence and liberty. Therefore, as we celebrate this unparalleled partnership, allow me to propose a toast to President Trump and the First Lady, and to the health, prosperity, and happiness of the people of the United States.
Well, today, 18th September, President Trump continued his engagements with a meeting at Chequers, the Prime Minister's official residence, in what officials describe as a light-hearted and constructive exchange. Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Trump reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening economic and security ties. Both leaders expressed optimism about deepening collaboration in trade, technology, and defense, while emphasizing the cultural affinity that continues to connect their peoples. Now, despite visible protests across London and Windsor, the atmosphere within the high-level meetings remained warm, with both sides going out of their way to praise each other and stress their common ground. The visit has now placed President Trump in rare company. He is the first United States president to be honored with 2 full state visits to Britain, a gesture that underscores the unique weight of the Anglo-American alliance. Now to the final report on the Flash News. Saudi Arabia and nuclear-armed Pakistan signed a formal mutual defense pact on Wednesday, a move that significantly strengthens their decades-long security partnership at a time of mounting regional tensions. The agreement, signed in Riyadh in the presence of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, commits both nations to treat an attack on one as an attack on the other. Now, officials in Riyadh described the pact as a culmination of years of discussions rather than a reaction to a single event. Yet its timing speaks volume. Israel's recent strike on Qatar, which targeted Hamas leaders, even as ceasefire talks were underway, rattled Gulf capitals and raised urgent questions about the reliability of long-standing security guarantees from the United States. For Saudi Arabia, deepening defense ties with Pakistan, the only Muslim majority state with nuclear weapons, represents not just continuity, but an important recalibration of its security posture. Analysts say the Pact institutionalizes a relationship that has long been close, while also diversifying Riyadh's alliances at a time when Washington's role in the Gulf is increasingly scrutinized. By binding itself formally to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia is sending a message of deterrence to its regional rivals and signaling that future security in the Gulf may be anchored more in regional partnerships than in outside powers. The agreement may also shift calculations in South Asia, where India will be watching closely, and in Israel, where security planners already view Saudi realignment with growing concern. But for both nations, this is more than a piece of paper. It is a statement of intent that underscores shared resolve in a turbulent region. And for the wider Middle East, it is another reminder that the strategic map is being redrawn one alliance at a time. With that, we've come to the end of today's Flash News on ABC Amba TV. Or coming up at the hour of 7 p.m. would be Undaunted. Do stay tuned. Thank you for watching.